You're on.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 4th class of Esoteric Psychology. And I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Laura and Rick. Laura in North Carolina and Rick in Atlanta. How you guys doing? I told them I would. And I don't really have any other announcements to start out with, so I guess we will start the class.
But you were going to explain about the...
Oh, well, we lost power yesterday, I guess, and power outage, so all of our computers and internet went out, and we called the internet company, and they said they're working on the problem, so we don't have any internet, and that's why this is probably going to be
a delayed tape.
Delayed tape, and you have to watch it tomorrow, which will be today when you watch it, so go figure that one out. Alrighty, so let's start the class. Chapter 4, Desire and How to Use It. So this is a very interesting chapter. It was really good. So anyway, I wanted to go back to this I talked about in the first class, the soul, which equals the mind, equals the character, which equals the unconscious and the subconscious. And all of those, it's all the same thing, connect up with the physical brain to express as objective mind. It just keeps coming up in the chapters that to know that these things are all the same, it helps with the understanding of reading what's going on. The soul functions through a form on whatever plane of existence it is located on. This form is an organization. At all times and on all planes, there is an intimate relationship between the form, occupied by the soul, the mind, and the forces and conditions of the external environment. So like we all know that the physical body is made up of the same elements as the planet Earth, right? So just like your astral body will be made up of the same elements in the astral plane and the spiritual body in the spiritual plane. So that's just basically what it's saying. And the astral body is made from what? Thoughts and feelings. So that's why you get thought cells and thought structures over there.
Well, is that also implying that the soul or mind learns from the conditions of the external environment?
Yes.
Is that implied? Okay.
Yes, that would be. Yeah, because we talked about that one chapter ago, talking about the interaction between the two. That's what it needs to have experiences, is the interaction with the environment.
Hey, Yvette?
Yep.
Turn around and draw the line behind you. Yeah, thank you. It's confused.
All right. Okay, so the initial work of the soul on any plane is to make proper adaptations to the environment of that plane. Such adaptations are needed not only for survival on that plane, but also to learn how to include activities for the realization of various desires. That's what I think we were talking about, right? The universe outside the body has various stimuli whose impact affects the body and is felt by the mind and the soul. So, and then this, so our adaptations of our physical or our form on a plane is to interact on that plane, to learn things, and this ultimately leads up to what your cosmic work is, right? We have those desires to do in the life. What ultimately our cosmic work is. So that's what we're wanting to do. Okay, so both the body and the soul, mind, react to all stimuli outside of the form. After any particular experience, both the body and the soul is not the same as it was before the experience, no matter how small the experience is. Something is added to the soul by every experience the soul undergoes.
Gotta love it.
Everybody knows Pavlov's dog, right? Yep. Everybody who's studied psychology or heard of Pavlov's dog, we understand that. This is conditioning is the most important process to understand. That's a subheading in the chapter. So. All right. So Zane's definition of conditioning is a process of learning by which experiences that are added to the soul determine how the organism will act in the presence of the same stimulus in the future. And then the dictionary definition: to accustom something to a state of being, or to establish a conditioned response in a subject. So Zane, I actually like Zane's definition better than the dictionary.
You always give us your
I got a lot of opinions on this, so believe me, I've distinguished between the two. Alright. So in the simplest forms of life are repeatedly brought in contact with the same type of stimulus as a result of experience, they react more quickly to that stimulus than they did at first. His example is a single-celled organism will retreat from a drop of acid more quickly after some previous experience and close to approach to such acid. And then when it's brought into contact with like food, it goes back more quickly towards that food. So he's using that as the example of pain, repellent, pleasure, go towards. This, you know, and you can see that conditioning in most things, even people, we do that.
And also that it learned, right?
And you learn.
And you learned something, so it went back faster,
right?
Or moved away faster.
Because
time.
it gets stored in your subconscious,
yeah.
And what your subconscious is, so it doesn't have to use so much energy to think every single time a new experience. It wants to do that. It wants to form patterns so that life becomes easier for you to work through.
Right.
You don't have to think about it. What is this? You just, oh, yeah, acid. Oh, wait. You know, food, go towards. So, in general, conditioning produced by pain towards repulsion, which that guy didn't move away, obviously.
And I bet he does the next time.
Exactly. And the conditioning produced by pleasure tends toward attraction. Of all the processes of the human mind and body, there is none more important fully to understand than that of conditioning, because all progress and all regress are the result of such conditioning. If we are to make satisfactory progress, we must make intelligent use of the conditioning process. When your consciousness experiences stimulus of the external environment, a sense of feeling is attached to it. Every action taken by an organism and every mental process is accompanied by feeling. Feeling is to various degrees either pleasurable, painful, or neutral, and rarely is it neutral. Therefore, every experience, whatever its nature, is accompanied by a sense of pain or pleasure to some degree. It may or it may not be clearly defined as pleasure or pain, but the basic elements of attraction, pleasure, or repulsion, pain, are in some degree present. Feeling also accompanies every state of consciousness. And because feeling accompanies every experience, an organism becomes conditioned when similar experience happened in the future. So feeling is conditioning energy. Then he starts talking about conditioning energy, and that's what he's talking about, feeling. So conditioning energy, the various degrees and type and quality of pleasure or pain. And this conditioning energy accompanies all feeling, and all feeling accompanies every experience. So every experience is conditioning yourself. Think about that, though.
Yes.
And all those experiences you had as a child, before you could comprehend the world, those have all feelings, all kinds of feelings attached to them that may be stored in your subconscious that you forget, and that's often where we find our problems later in life.
Or our talents.
Or our talents. Right. So Zane writes, it is folly to try to escape the law of nature, which modern scientific psychology phrases, man is led by his feelings alone. Why shouldn't he be led by his feelings? This is why feelings were evolved by his soul. When people try to act against their feelings, they are attempting the impossible. What they should do instead, so that their actions may be controlled by wisdom instead of blind impulse, is to properly train their feelings. When their feelings are properly conditioned, their actions will take the proper course, as a result of the operation of this natural law. So the only thing is I don't think it's impossible to act against your feelings. I don't know. I had a little note here too, if anybody wanted to discuss that. Because I think we often act against our feelings or allow our feelings to dominate us in an action.
Well, like, can you think of an example?
Well, if feeling is pleasure or pain, we can often go against that, right? Like if something's painful, doesn't mean we're always going to avoid it. Sometimes we go towards it. So we're taking our feelings and then we're going in the opposite direction, right?
Well, that would be considered kind of crazy, though, right?
No, because that happens all the time.
What's an example?
Especially in relationships.
Thank you. That's a good example.
What about if you're feeling anger and you're feeling angry, but you
Right.
decide not to express that anger? You go out,
Right.
you go out of
Against
the
it,
room.
sure.
That's a
Well,
feeling
somehow
that you're going against.
Or you try to cultivate different feelings for
Mhm.
that situation. I mean, there has to be a way to train your
Well,
feelings,
that's what
right?
he's talking about, training your feelings.
Yeah. So if you're training your feelings, then you are trying to not act by your already conditioned feelings.
Right.
Like children.
Yeah. They'll often
They-
go with their feelings.
Right. But then hopefully they have an adult in their lives that helps them to recondition through whatever
Right.
means works for that child
Right.
and retrain their feelings.
Right.
No,
And sometimes, things are painful that we have to do anyway. Exercise is number one, I can say that right there.
Right.
But you have to get through that because there's going to be a benefit.
No
And he
pain,
did
no
talk
gain.
about that at another point. I remember him talking about how our objective mind can override those. But then he says this.
Yeah,
So I
that's
guess
a little
it's something
ambiguous,
different-
isn't it?
Different contexts that,
Yeah.
these were in two different chapters that I remember reading one thing.
Mhm.
Well, but I think that there's
Yeah.
I think there's a core truth he's trying to
to
get there. Yeah, and I think what it is that you may fool yourself
Yeah.
to think that you're doing something, but that energy is still there. And
Yeah.
it's moving you in an unconscious way.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about feelings only. He says that it's impossible to act against your feelings, and I would say that's not true. And that's the one point, because we're going to talk about what you were just talking about a little bit as we go, but I wanted to specify feeling being pain or pleasure.
So why does modern psychology, or does it?
That's started in
Say.
the 40s. Remember that.
Okay.
Anyway, so
That sentence you could have.
well, there's more of this to come along, so we can keep discussing. So when we get to, we'll discuss more. Anyway, from chapter 1, we learned that thought cells are made up of various thought elements, which Jane called psychoplasm in the astral body. Similar to protoplasm, makes up the physical cells of the physical body. This is a recap of what I talked about in chapter 1. Experiences are the thought elements that go into making the thought cells of the astral body, and that the thought cells organize together to form larger thought structures. And to think of the thought structures as like thought organs, like liver cells all go make the liver, skin cells make your skin. So in the astral world, certain thoughts categorize and form structures in those areas. Does that make sense?
Yep, sure does.
Okay. And so this is, I'm going to compare the two physical cells, and the next slide is going to be astral cells. The protoplasm, this was from chapter 1 again, the definition of protoplasm. And also, this is what Zane says, each cell has an individuality and a consciousness of its own, which is very true. Science has actually found that out now, that is really true.
They caught up again.
Again, keep doing that.
And I wanted to show here is this is a physical cell, animal cell, and we wanted to see all these elements inside the cell, because if we think of a thought cell, stellar cell, we have to think of lots of things inside of us, oneself. We don't just, it's not just a thought, there's feelings attached, there's all these other little elements that are attached in cells. So I wanted to show you, this is going to come up, mitochondria. It's where our DNA is in. Okay. So the astral cells are made up of cytoplasm. That's Zane's word, of course. He made that up. So the chief substance of astral organic life made from thought elements. Thought elements are experiences, and each astral cell, thought cell, cellular cell, also has an individuality and a consciousness of its own. So I wanted to. So when your cells are not working together in harmony to do their job, disease will often come into the cells. I'm talking about physically. Cancer is often when your constant thoughts are going against the harmony of your body's instinct to do its job. It starts getting overpowering discordant information coming from your unconscious mind, and so the cells in their individuality start working with that discordant information and become discordant and inharmonious to the physical body, which only wants to work in the harmonious instinctive state to do its job. So in that sense, cells definitely have their own individuality and consciousness in that they're working to do their job, but if you have your overall thoughts constantly going into, your astral body, and then it comes from your astral body into your physical body. So we can, the cells will start going, okay, well, overpowering unconscious stuff wants us to be inharmonious, so that's what usually happens. Anyway. So to compare these two, I didn't find this in the book, but it kind of just made sense when I was doing this. The mitochondria in the physical cells where DNA is located. In the astrology of the birth chart is like the DNA, genetic map of previous soul experiences in the stellar cells of the astral body. Genetic material is where your physical looks and other characteristics of you come from. The astrology of the birth chart tells us where our soul characteristics come from the previous soul experiences. Genetic material can express in many different ways, and genetic potential or genetic diseases can be changed or modified by life choices and experiences. The astrology of the birth chart can be expressed in many different ways, and the astrological potential or obstacles can also be changed or modified by the attitudes a person has about the experiences that come into the life, mapped by progressions and transits. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of like
correspondence.
that's your beginnings, and genetic material, that's your beginnings, but you, throughout your life, can change or modify what, your genetics says, Your whole family can be very large and overweight and heart disease at 50, but if you make the proper lifestyle changes, you don't have to do that. That doesn't have to happen to you. So, and this is just a picture. Some symbolical pictures I found. I thought that was neat, huh?
It
The astrology.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty ugly looking cell, but
It's kind of hairy looking.
but see that you get the mitochondria in there, along with all this other stuff. So I
Right.
thought that was a pretty neat correlation.
Yeah.
So each experience adds the conditioning energy, feeling, to the thought cells of the astral body. An experience can be one of the following: awareness of an external condition, a physical action taken, or a thought. Experiences make up the thought elements that go into creating the thought cells which make up the astral body. Accompanying all experiences is conditioning energy, which is the feeling. Therefore, this conditioning energy also goes into making up the thought cells, stellar cells of the astral body. In fact, this conditioning energy determines the manner in which thought elements combine and whether the thought cells will become harmonious or discordant, and to what degree. Where are we? Okay.
Yeah, 21.
All right. Then the thought cells that have similar experiences and conditioning energy may come together to form the structures of the astral body, called thought structures, under the idea that like attracts like. So similar, like if we think of it in the astrology, thoughts that pertain to our career go into one area, and all the thoughts that we come into, that we think about career goes into that, and that would create that thought structure, that kind of idea. But there's another way that thought structures are formed, and this is when two groups of thoughts or experiences come together in the mind with an accompanying feeling, and their union forms a dynamic stellar structure with its own kind of conditioning energy. So, you know, two types of experiences coming together, forming a structure, and then it has its own unique form of conditioning energy. So, it is this feeling or conditioning energy which determines whether this newly formed dynamic stellar structure is harmonious or discordant, and to what degree. Pleasure or pain to some degree enters into and forms an essential part of the energy of every thought cell, every thought structure, dynamic stellar structure, and every combination of the thought-built body, which is the mind or the soul. So this is like clusters of thought cells, little thought
happy
structures.
They look like little grapes.
Okay, so for example, when an experience happens and is mildly pleasurable, conditioned energy feeling, then that experience goes into making a stellar cell of a harmonious nature. And its conditioning energy that accompanies the experience will have as much intensity stored in the stellar cell as when it was first experienced. Then when you think about that experience, it will always bring the mild pleasure. That's what you started out with. And this stored energy will attract to it more mildly pleasurable experiences of a like nature, which if repeatedly happens can form a stellar structure with an attractive harmonious trend built into it, and likewise with displeasurable experiences. Does that make sense, right? Okay, so I wrote, so this is why it's important to understand your past conditioning for various experiences. Because every time, even if you're unconscious of it, every time you have you think about like a past experience that's going to come up, it's going to have that same connotation until you can work with it and change it, right?
Until it's modified.
Until it's modified.
Neil can't hold this one.
He's
He's probably wondering why we are not streaming.
Yeah, you want to answer?
Yeah, you can.
Even our phones aren't working.
Really?
Go.
Okay. So, oh yeah, I wrote here, because unlike other organisms of Earth, humans can condition and experience any way they want to. A person can experience pain even if it's a pleasurable thing, like hugging. Autistic people do not like to be touched or hugged, and that's generally a pleasurable experience, right? So that is when you condition yourself, you know, and then when something's generally painful, like I had a roommate, like I told you, who was a cutter, and then they find pleasure in that, you know. So we can modify our experiences, even though they're in general, most people would consider them this way or that way. We can modify them. We can change anything we want, right?
Right. Well, when I was a kid, I was really shy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't like, was not attracted to social situations.
Right.
That much. And, but I learned pretty early on, that's not very cool. And so I had to work at reconditioning that.
Exactly.
And over time you do.
Right.
You are able to change that.
Right. And I think that's where I had that problem back where he was talking about feelings. That why shouldn't we be guided by our feelings? Because often, if we started out from when we were a kid and all the things that we felt, and we avoided all the painful things, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
Well, but it starts out, my behavior was such that I would do unsociable things. And that's because I felt uncomfortable. And so I was taught to rethink that for, different ways.
Okay.
But I had to exercise, in order to change it, To find the pleasure in it, I had to work at doing that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's what it is that you naturally move, but until you can change that, you do move in the direction of the experience or the conditioning.
Yes, in the beginning we do,
Yeah.
but we don't have to. It's not impossible to go against, we can change it. Is what I'm
Well,
trying
oh,
to say.
absolutely. Absolutely. But
I guess initially, before we recognize it as such, we're going to go in the direction of its condition. From
I don't think you have a choice.
right in the beginning.
It's a natural
and
thing
then,
to do.
And
Yeah.
then when it comes up and you've decided that you didn't like that direction, you're avoiding some painful experience, you, at some point in your life, you decided to look at it and change.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So I guess, initially we just go with our feelings, and then later in life we decide if we want to change something.
Right.
We can change.
Well, and how else would you get to know yourself?
Exactly.
That's the only way I can think of to get to know who I am.
Good point.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Alright, we're at 24. Alright. Next subheading, all action is due to the release of desire energy when under tension. That looks like a lot of tension, doesn't it?
I would say.
She was kind of peaceful though, doesn't she?
Wasn't Megan talking about that earlier today? Like, doing the back end. Alright, so now we have some definitions. Desire, Zane's definition, are energies in a state of tension within the thought structures of the astral body. Also when the objective consciousness recognizes an attractive or repulsive force. This is also called a desire. To which are one for dictionary. Think of desire as an energy that is stored in the thought cells and thought structures, building up tension, waiting for the potential energy, the stored energy, to be released and become kinetic, active energy. In a broad and general way, Zane says that every thought cell, thought structure, dynamic cellular structure, and combination of thought organizations within the astral body contain desires. If a desire is a tension energy being stored, waiting for release, then Zane would be corrected in his general statement. Desire is an energy in a potential state waiting to be released in a given activity. It doesn't look like it's repeated when I'm doing this, but then I start reading it and I'm like, wow, it's like repetition.
That's right.
Okay, so this is a breakdown of a sentence. So desire is an energy which has produced a tension because it's being stored in thought organizations of the astral body, which seek release, moving through kinetic active energy in some activity. This activity includes everything from moving a little finger to getting food for dinner to slaying dragons in your fantasy thinking to realizing love and everything else in between that requires some activity to be released. So everything requires desire. Thus, every activity of the mind and body is due to the discharge of the desire energy, which while straining and stored can be called a desire. Where there is no desire, therefore, there is no organic activity of any kind. The release of the energy of any desire gives rise to feelings because every desire also contains conditioning energy within it. When desire energy is provided with an opportunity for release, it can express in 3 different ways. So these are 3 different slides. This is a Zane sentence, and this is what I wrote to sum this up, and let's see if it makes sense. So I'll read Zane's sentence. Attracting the attention of objective consciousness, which connects them up with the electrical energies of the brain, desire energies give activity to thoughts of a similar nature. Our objective thinking is given its trend by the release of desire energies of the stellar cells. So I wrote, the release of desire energy flows in the direction of where our objective consciousness and our attention goes. Does that sound right? Does that sound what he's saying?
I think so.
Okay. Sum it up.
Yes.
So this is another of his. Without our being conscious of the process, the release of the desire energies enables the stellar cells to work on the astral plane to attract events into the life which correspond to the way they feel. That is, whatever fortune or misfortune is attracted is due to the activities of the thought cells which express on the astral plane. And I wrote, what is attracted into your life is due to the direction of release of the desire energies of the thought cells on the astral plane. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Because can you flip back one?
Yeah.
That has to do,
This is where our attention is.
Right.
That's what it looks like to me.
right.
Because when I read the sentence, it all makes sense. But then at the end of the sentence, I'm like, what did he just say? It all made sense when I was reading it.
He also says exactly what you said in those words. He says almost the exact same thing elsewhere.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right. That's good to know then. So, okay.
So this is what you're attracted to
In your
is
life.
determined by the
Direction of the release of the desire energies of the thought cells, which is what your mind is, etc. Okay, and then the releases of such energies are responsible for the stimulation of endocrine glands and for chemical and other changes within the body, as well as for our observed behavior. All of our physical activities are due to the release of the desire energies of the stellar cells, of which the unconscious mind is composed. So I wrote, our observed outward behavior in life is due to the release of desire energies in our unconscious mind, which is in the astral realm, made up of thought cells. So it's something to do with our behavior, right? Our observed behavior.
right.
Okay. And this is a summing it up. When desire energy is provided with an opportunity for release, it can express in 3 different ways. Where your objective consciousness and your attention goes is where it's going to be expressed. It's what's attracted into your life is where direction of release of desire energies of the thought cells. And, on the astral plane. Okay, so I highlighted that. Because I think this part has to do with the planets, the astral energies of the planets. I remember going back and reading that. That's why I highlighted that part. So that's why it's in the unconscious world. So you might not realize that there's a desire and a direction.
Right, you have this desire energy, it's released on the astral plane.
Right.
It may be happening unconsciously, but
Right.
there's this unconscious desire that gets released, and then
So it can be expressed on it's here, but it's from the astral plane. So sometimes we do things, we don't know where that comes from, that desire energy comes from. It's from the astral, like the astrology charts and stuff. So, and then our observed outward behavior in life is due to the release of desire energies in our unconscious mind.
So doesn't that go back to that statement that we were questioning earlier?
What was that?
You move in the you always move in the direction of your
Feelings? I don't know yet, though.
Okay. Well, it says
Maybe initially, yeah.
that there's the desire energy. So desire is built of condition. Isn't it?
It has conditions when it becomes, when it starts.
When
I
it starts,
guess.
yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It is. It's like it gets deeper the more you think about it, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to chapter 2. I had this in my PowerPoint presentation, chapter 2, just because I wanted to go back about these desires. So we have the 3 main desires, desire for significance or the will to power, the reproductive desires, and the nutritive desires. And so the drive for significance gives rise to the other 2. And so that's what I think comes in, like your astral body starts with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we all have these desires already programmed into our thought cells to begin with, and maybe our physical cells too. Right?
That's what keeps us moving through life, isn't it?
Right. And then there's other desires along the way as we go, right? So, but these are the basics. They make up a lot of the stuff. So the reproductive desires is the positive polarity desire and attains significance through expression outside of the self. Whereas the nutritive desire is a negative polarity desire and attains significance through adding something to the self, like food. And it manifests and the reproductive desires manifest as the tendency to perpetuate the race or in the desire to perform some creative work. And the nutritive desires manifest as the rise to all those activities that go towards self-preservation, which in turn gives opportunities for significance. And so again, so we have the drive for significance, the will to power, the original, that's from the ego. These two come from that, so they're all those the basics. And then these all come, they combine from here, and then they have all these. So that's what I can totally see, that how that is like your DNA in your physical cells, right? Those are your basics that you start out with before you even having thoughts, maybe.
It's like
your
a
astral
structure
body,
of it.
right?
Yeah.
Your astral body is there when you're born as a baby, and it's the astral body baby, I don't know. That's right. It's there, but it's there and it's made up of something, and it's all this.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you go and you have experiences in this physical world, then you start modifying and changing and working with all these things, right? Interesting. Anyway, okay, so back to all action is due to wills. Some situations for a person or an organism call for more than normal volume of energy to be present. Like in emergency situations, the call to conflict fills up higher tensions more quickly within the thought cells, such that the discharge of the desire energy creates a profound and widespread disturbance over the nerve currents, which releases in violent action. Along with this violent release of high-tension desire energy, intensified feelings are also released and felt from the thought cells, creating emotions. So this was from chapter 3, the definition of emotions. Arose in the unconscious mind of every form the soul took on in reaction to the conditions of the environment. And this is from this chapter. It says, emotions are intense feelings arising from the release of high-tension desire energy. And then these, I had these from last week, I think, or last time. Emotion is generated when feeling is united with the mind. Emotion is the activity of feeling directed into the mental concept, which that totally goes along with what Zane says, that all of our experiences and thoughts contain conditioning energy or feeling, right? Yep. So I love when I can find other stuff to support Zane. That's great. So, okay. Other situations that have higher stored potential tension energy that create emotions when the desire energy is released is belief that a fond desire will be realized, stimulating the emotion hope. Realization of a fond hope, stimulating the emotion joy. The thought or presence of a love object, stimulating the emotion of love or passion. The call to conflict, stimulating anger. Or the realizing inadequacy, stimulating the emotion sorrow. Those are the examples that he gives in the book of these very intense stored potential energy desires. So, oh boy, we're going to have to talk a lot because we're already on slide 40. So, every mental and emotional state is accompanied by a definite change in the physical body. Stronger desires, or desires that have been repressed, which are not recognized by the objective mind, give rise to corresponding tensions in the physical body. So, in other words, even if you're repressing something and there's a strong desire, we can often see that tensions in people's bodies. You can just see somebody's body that's tensed up. You don't maybe know exactly what's going on with them, but you know, something has to be expressed. That's usually when there needs to be an expression of their feelings or emotion, or they need to do something, you know. So, desire tensions in the astral body reproduce themselves in the physical body through etheric energies. That was the energy transfer body, remember. These etheric energies stimulate nerve cells, which generate electrical charges, causing a large difference in electrical potential between different regions of the physical body. So this is a physical effect of actually what happens. In the case of emergency situations, the endocrine glands secrete chemicals into the body so that the body becomes able to respond to the emergency very quickly. Now, oftentimes when there's an emergency situation, the things that happen in your body are so, like, they're, I don't know if they're the speed of light or beyond the speed of light, but it seems like it, right? And I think that's what's working on the astral side is a lot, millions of times faster. It can go past the speed of light, right? It is past the speed of light. Thought is. And so, like, I always remember them scientists trying to say how, you know, your mind and all these neurons are going like this, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so slow. You know, things happen so fast, it almost feels like it's instantaneous when we respond to an emergency situation. You know what I mean?
Right. It puts you in a hyper state of awareness.
Right, but something must be going on. And I think Zane is kind of talking about it here, about what's going on in the astral realm. And then it comes here, and it looks like it's instantaneous. So whether the objective consciousness recognizes it or not, there is a straining of energies toward activities that will attain some goal. If action results, then the energy has been released from its potential state, potential energy, into the active state, kinetic energy. The energy is used up in the action, and this relieves the tension and consequently the desire. And then the desire is either gone or reduced. So these are some definitions that were in the book. Do you want me to? I think they're on your handouts. I actually, so you guys didn't have to like sit there writing them all down. They're actually in the handouts. But yes, they are. So Zane's definition is basically talking about desire and tension, and these are just moving up in what do you call it? Intensity. Like unusually intense desire with a relative short duration is a passion. A mood is the desire tension with a more moderate in intensity but of greater duration. A temperament is when a particular type of desire tension becomes so habitual and continuous as to dominate the personality. And then a sentiment is when a desire tension is complex and indirect, and the emotion that is released is like that of honor or patriotism. And these are just dictionary definitions. They're pretty much similar, like what I can see. So I don't have to read them all, right?
Well,
you go ahead. You go ahead and read them? All right. So craving is an intense, urgent, or abnormal desire or longing. A passion is intense, striving, or overmastering feeling of or conviction. An ardent affection, a strong liking or desire for and a devotion to activity, object, or concept. A mood is a prevailing attitude. His
greater duration.
Greater duration, so that says prevailing, so.
Greater duration, yeah.
So it gives us
Attitude.
that sense of being
of
longer duration.
whereas a passion can be short. And temperament is characteristic or habitual inclination or mode of emotional response. So it's kind of very similar.
Yeah.
And continuous.
Continuous. Habitual. Yeah, hey, look at that. And then a sentiment is a specific view or notion, emotional idealism. That's like patriotism. You can see that.
This is pretty close.
Yeah, kind of cool. I get more excited as I go and I find stuff very similar. I'm like, yes, all right.
There's agreement out there.
I like when I find similarities. I guess that's that pleasure going towards something.
Right. It makes sense.
That's cute.
Right? So, thus it is that all expressions of any life form, physical actions, feelings, emotions, passions, moods, sentiments, and temperament, have behind them a lack of satisfaction which gives rise to a tension, which is called a desire. So,
I like the dress.
I started thinking like
buttons.
I should get pictures where they're like pushing the cake in their faces. That's a tension or desire. I like this because this lady looks older.
And she's flexible.
Look at that. I love it. Conditioning desires is the only avenue to a better life. So, without desire, there is no activity. Activity is the expression of desire. The amount of activity expressed is determined by the amount of desire, tension built up in the associated thought cells. The type of activity expressed is determined by the type of desire, tension built up within the thought cells. And the activity that happens is determined by the manner in which the desire has been conditioned, pleasurable or painful to whatever degree. Makes sense. Therefore, there is but one possible avenue to a better life, which is through the proper use or conditioning of desires, not by repressing or eliminating desire. Often, I don't know if people know that or not, but what happens if they're trying to repress, more and more tension builds up. And what is that? Tension is energy.
Yeah.
Desire energy. So if you try repressing, all you're doing is building more and more energy into the thing that you're trying not to express, which is not very good. Because then it'll build up and one day it will be expressed.
Or find other ways that are inappropriate to express.
Exactly. So that is why Zane is absolutely right. Repressing something is not the way to do it. There's other ways, and that's a lot of what Zane talks about. There's lots of other ways, right? Sublimation, conditioning your desires, blah, blah, blah.
Moving the energy.
Moving the energy towards a higher goal that you actually want, all kinds of things. But repression, yeah. And I don't know, eliminating desire, I don't know how you do that other than expressing it. I mean, that was in the sentence. It was.
Well, you know
and I was
what?
like,
You might be able to change it. You might be so successful. You may. Let's see. What would be an example
of eliminating desire before you allowed it to express?
Well, okay. Let's take food for it. Some
Okay.
type of food.
Okay.
It's sugar.
Okay.
And that's.
Right.
I don't know if this will work or not, but I can see where you can, over time, convince yourself that sugar is really not good for you.
Right.
And you actually eliminate the desire for sugar.
Without having to gorge yourself with sugar.
Without it. The energy gets redirected. It gets directed into thinking. When you're craving sugar, for me, when I'm craving sugar, it's usually because I really want protein.
Really?
I think I've learned that. Yeah. And if I go with some protein, my desire for sugar just goes away immediately.
That's cool. So yeah, you're right. So you didn't have to indulge that desire in its craving, right?
You substitute.
But
You try to find another thing that will satisfy that
constructive outlet for the desire.
Now,
Okay.
I can't say that I've eliminated the desire for sugar.
Well,
But I can see where you might move in that direction.
Right. Okay. So that's what he's talking about. Because I wasn't for sure. I was like, really? I thought, wait. But they had to be expressed. Okay, wait a minute. But no, it makes
there's also
sense
sublimation.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's that, but
Sublimation.
there's different things too. Like sublimation is different from that, but it's channeling desired energy into constructive outlets.
Oh yeah. So it's similar to that. What would be kind of a good example of that? The sublimation.
Supposedly art
Okay. Oh.
is
okay.
a higher expression of the sexual desires.
Oh, that's right. The creative energies.
It's the creative energy.
Right.
And interestingly enough, Picasso is the prime example of the highly sexed artist.
Right. So did
He
he?
can't possibly satisfy all his sexual desire through.
So was he, when he was doing art, was he not having sex?
No.
Oh.
Well, although, yes, I think during parts of his life he actually did do that.
Okay.
But I don't remember all the details. I remember seeing a movie about it. But I always thought about, because I knew things about his life.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had read other places besides C.C. Zane about the sublimation of sexual desire into artistic outlets.
Creative things.
Creative.
Right, because it is a creative energy.
I think oftentimes when you're caught up in some creative expression, having a sexual expression is kind of secondary. It's
Right.
It's something that you have to redirect yourself, you know, you're so busy creating something that that's satisfying.
Right, because I've seen, I don't know, probably in movies and stuff where, probably about real people where, you know, the artist, he can't be bothered by his wife or something for a while because he's like, and musicians will do that. They'll hold themselves up in
mode,
down in a, so yeah, I mean, I could see that. So that makes sense.
And desired energy is very important for being productive and creative.
Absolutely.
So in some cases, I can imagine you need to stimulate. You may not have enough there.
Energy.
So then what do? You somehow got to
You
stimulate.
have to stimulate it, yeah.
Breathing helps.
Breathing.
No, it does.
We're not
breathing.
No.
Or constantly reinforcing something so that it becomes so strongly desirable that it finally motivates you to action or something.
But that's like a building up of attention, right?
Right.
So you don't want to release all the time because then you don't have any creative energy left. Right. No, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're actually building up tension,
Right.
not necessarily you're building up the desire. So you're building up
Right.
the desire.
I think that's why it's called
could be tricky.
mastership.
Mastership. Yes.
One of
Because
our goals is
Kundalini
mastership.
yoga is about that too.
Kundalini is about,
Which is, and
Right,
so,
yeah.
which is also Zane talks about is you have to be real careful with stuff like that
yeah.
because you're stimulating the sexual desire and hoping that you will be able to channel it properly into spiritual.
Well, I guess so. I haven't studied it too much, but I also know that it connects up with these other glands in the top of your head, and that it is the lower sexual energy comes up and
Right.
actually is spiritualized.
Right.
And you don't.
You just said
It's
in a
a
different
spiritual.
way exactly
It's
what
a
I said.
spiritual thing.
Right.
It's not like a sexual thing. It's a spiritual thing. But if you're not prepared for it, it's like this huge amount of energy that
Exactly.
can go in your body. It can really just short circuit you for a while. I see.
Or
it.
express
It would be
through,
like living with a wild animal.
or express through more
Yeah.
deep,
Predictable.
Maybe, yeah.
And unstable.
Really?
Right.
Okay. But yeah, that's a very interesting, concept. Okay. All right. Back to reading. There's no other way I can really do this. I did my first class because I had a lot to write on, but every time I'm always trying to think if there's another way I can get this information across, without doing the PowerPoint presentations and reading off of it. But for this class, it's, this is the only way I can go. I'm sorry, but
No, I think it's your way and it's wonderful.
right.
So far, so good.
Okay, I'll keep going then. Okay, so I read this slide, right?
Not the bottom
Not
one.
the bottom.
The only manner in which people can markedly change their destiny in the direction of their choosing is through appropriate modification and intensification of the desires of the stellar cells and thought structures of the astral body. I think that's exactly what you just said, Paul just said. In the appropriate modification and of your choosing.
Do you think most people today care about that? Do we think, are we more hedonistic than we used to be?
Yes.
Do you think, I just wonder
I
about that
think there's a
sometimes.
lot more that we can see that's very hedonistic, but I think there's a lot more people that we don't see because it doesn't make news, but there's a lot more people that are actually into spiritual, trying to get spiritual.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is the masses, which we see the more hedonistic, the
Right.
more, because nothing shocks us anymore. We see stuff in the news, politicians,
Yes.
sex in bathrooms and everything else. And now we're at that point where we're just like, oh yeah, another guy,
Another one. Yeah.
oh now it's a guy, okay. Is it the girl intern or is it the guy intern? It's like it doesn't even shock anymore.
Right.
Because we hear these stories and I think it just becomes more and more like nobody's shocked by anything anymore. We're just kind of go with the flow, but now everybody's just, I think what we see in the world is we're seeing all of,
What makes the news?
yeah.
The sensational?
Everything seems to be expressed. All those desires that were back in the earlier
50s.
days, 50s,
And
40s,
prior,
and
it was
before.
repressed?
Yeah. it's like it's all of a sudden everything is coming out, and it's available for everybody to see. All of our problems, our issues. Mel Gibson is just in the news. Did you hear about that? Oh God, you don't
Just
hear
recently?
What did he do?
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone.
That's
He's been doing
What-
Kundalini yoga.
that. He was actually he
Not
was doing hypnotism too, but no, I won't say what he did, but it was a tape that was made back in January. Something he said to his ex-wife, and I guess she recorded it, and she's putting it out on the internet now,
Aw.
just to show what type of a guy he was. Now, it was pretty awful things he said, but you know. Somebody said, like, what, you know, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody in fits of anger will say some horrible things that they don't mean. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just, to me, it's like it's what we're seeing today. Everything is coming out. Nobody is safe. Everything is coming out, and everybody's like, oh, over here. Oh, what's over
Wow,
here? What's
it
going
must-
on over here?
Think about this, what it must be like on the astral plane where your emotions are, because of the extra dimensions, the emotions are part of, you know, what you're thinking and feeling. My
Right.
understanding
Yeah, right.
is right out front.
Yes.
So everybody
you can't
can see
hide
it.
it.
So you can't see it, which helps you to quickly over time train
Want to
it, because
recondition,
you
right.
can't hide it anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
And so this is almost the same thing where all our stuff is coming out and we can no longer hide it
Well,
anymore.
a real good reason to be truthful and learn how to have it here. Because on the other side, you get no choice.
Maybe that's preparing these people. Maybe that exposure is preparing us and these people that it's happening to be more truthful within ourselves.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's part of the process, human process,
Yeah.
perhaps, or the evolution of this age.
The current
Right.
age, exactly.
Right. Because it's all going to come out eventually anyway. You know what I
Right.
mean? And if it's in directions that you don't want it to go, then you have to learn how to supplement or change or modify, because you have to have a higher overarching goal.
Uh-huh.
And when you have that, and then you want to work towards that, that's actually my PowerPoint presentation. Where's my water? Where is my water?
Water. I don't know,
It's
but I'll
right
go
there.
get you some.
Thanks. Diane.
So are these stellar cells that we're looking at, Yvette?
Well, that's what I wanted you to believe. Of course
They look like little stars.
Yeah, there's these neon pictures of cells and neurons and stuff, and I said, oh, that looks like it could be an astral thing.
There you go.
Astral. Okay, so every event that is attracted into the life is attracted through the activities, which are determined by the desires, of the stellar cells and stellar structures. Those stellar cells and structures that feel happy desire only things which are harmonious. But those stellar cells and structures that feel mean and discontented work equally hard to bring into the life discordant events. Now, this is the idea of like attracts like, right? But there is the opposite is also true, where positive attracts negative and negative attracts positive, right? But we also have like attracts like. So we have both of those things are true, are they not?
Well, yeah.
In those,
I've
Small
never thought
concepts.
about it in that way. I mean, usually there's polarity in everything. So that's right where opposites attract. When polarity
opposites
is.
attract.
But
In this case,
when
he's
you're
saying-
building,
Okay.
well, no, there's a conflict.
Okay.
It appears there's a conflict there. I have a feeling there's a resolution to the conflict.
Okay, so talk it out. What were you gonna say?
So, but I can see where when you're building your feelings tend to go where they're into the. They
Where
tend to
they're
congregate. Yeah, where they're similar.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's what he's
So
saying.
I'm not sure I'm not sure how that works. I'm just babbling.
No, I mean we're so similar, Mickey.
We babble a lot, don't we?
We have that stream of thought, and then we want to talk it through, and then we're like, wait a minute. But no, I mean, what he's saying here is obviously the idea of like attracts like, but we also know the opposite is also true in other instances where polarities attract as well. Positive attracts negative, negative attracts positive. But here, I put this in because I wanted to say it's like that.
Well, maybe it has to be opposites too, because that's the only way you can change. That's because if you can't see the opposite of what the feeling is, you
Right.
don't have a place to go with it.
You wouldn't be able to change it, would you?
Yeah, right.
That's right. So
Well,
that's why.
You know, the element Mercury, you know, the mind is supposed to be mercurial.
Right.
And the element, and the reason Mercury is used is because, you know, if you've ever played with Mercury, you can have
Heard
a
about
little...
it.
It's
Well,
dangerous
I have
to
when
play
I-
with.
I can't-
When we were kids, it was everywhere.
Now we know why we're a little...
Maybe that was part of our evolutionary
But
progress.
you get little globules of mercury and you
Yeah.
get them close together and boom,
They
they,
come together.
and that's a great example of how they're
Like
alike.
attracts, like,
Yes.
They attract each other. Then it's not a matter of polarity. They just combine into a big glob, don't they?
yeah. Right.
It's really weird how they do that.
Kind of why I was thinking about that, not Mercury specifically, but what you're referring to, which is the mind or soul. I realized that the soul is a sponge. It collects
Oh,
things.
it's absorbent,
Right.
yes it is.
Absolutely.
And if the mind is mercuric, then that's a real good example
And the mind is
of
the
it
soul
collecting together.
and the unconscious, right? So the unconscious is like the mind. So whatever is being, everything from the unconscious coming in, what comes out is your objective consciousness going, what do I want to say? We even want to direct this energy.
Maria Montessori wrote a book called The Absorbent Mind, and she was speaking in particular about children, you know, early on, because you can really see they truly are observing and then manifesting. I mean, absorbing, manifesting, absorbing, manifesting, absorbing, and
Right.
the mind really is like a sponge picking up everything.
And
when
they're
you're a
the,
small child.
and they're the most truthful thing beings on this planet, and they're not even trying to hurt nobody. They say the truth like they see it.
Yes. Well, God loves them for it too.
Right. But if you ever like want to get over your hurt feelings over something, just have a child, you know, point out something about you. And they're not trying to hurt your feelings. Okay, so the function of a birth chart is to map the most energetic thought structures in the unconscious mind at the time of one's birth. The desired attention in one department of life may release energy when stimulated by planetary vibrations that brings either fortunate or unfortunate events related to that department of life. That a person is unaware of their own desires or the way the desire feels in the unconscious mind. I think that's a better way to say it. Zane had that in his sentence, but I had to put that away. So it's not that you're unaware of your desires, but you're unaware of the way they feel in your unconscious mind. Does not prevent the desire energy from acting from the astral plane to bring into the person's life events which the desires are conditioned to attract. So,
Otherwise, how would you know how screwed up you are?
right. But that is why it's good to know what your unconscious desires are and how they feel and what they look like.
Right.
And that's just good. And what I've done is just, I go back into my past. I find a feeling that comes up every time. Actually, I have a funny story if you guys want to hear it.
Sure.
Okay. So I have to go onto the gate at work, right? And there's always a gate guard. And I tend to go into the same gate at the same time. And so the guy gets to know me and, you know, he does the small talk. I'm not very good at small talk. I actually hate small talk. So I start getting this nervous feeling. So this feeling starts to come up of, I don't like this. Why? He's a nice guy. Nothing wrong with it. And I started to like go, why do I get uncomfortable when somebody starts to get familiar with me in an acquaintance setting? So I had to figure out why. So one day I was going into work and it was really windy out, and so the guy just made a little comment, stay out of the wind, you know? I go, yeah, but I look at the wind. He's like, huh? I mean, I see the wind. I'm like, fine, see the wind. So that's when it dawned on me why I'm uncomfortable, because my words do not come out very graciously all the time. And it happens very often, especially when I'm in it's a quick wit situation. I'm not good at it. So what I used to do is I just used to avoid the situation, but then I looked into it. Why am I uncomfortable? Why is this feeling coming up every time? And then I found out why, and now I recognize why, and now I just keep my mouth shut. I just nod and smile and say, have a nice day. But see, if I just went based on the feelings alone, I would just keep avoiding and avoiding and avoiding those situations instead of looking at why am I feeling that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good way that you can look at stuff.
Right.
Anyway. Alright, so the only way that an individual can escape certain misfortunes is to recondition those desires in the thought structures which are mapped in the birth chart by inharmonious planets, so that they will no longer feel discordant and bring about discordant events as their expression. How do we recondition desires so that they feel pleasurable as opposed to painful? Zane says that the process of changing stellar cells so that desire energy when released will attract harmonious events are considered in full detail in verse 9. I was like, really? Okay. So I wanted to have, like, why? How do we do this? And it was like, oh, yeah, when you get to the next book or whatever.
This is just the theory.
These are the theories behind what we'll get to eventually later, right? So, where are we? Okay, so the only thing that I had talked about in this was how do we recondition desires? I'm sure he tells us, but in my mind, from other stuff I've read, is you just give energy to the thoughts of your choosing, and you attach a positive emotion to it. And also stuff I've heard here. It's a very similar thing. But you give more energy, because if you take your thoughts and it's all about this negative space, then you train your brain to start thinking and giving energy to the higher or more pleasurable thoughts, or things that you are looking forward to, or something of a positive nature, instead of constantly thinking about all these negative things going on. And then you give positive energy to it, right?
Right.
Or something to that effect.
Well, and what I get from reading Zane is that, and it seems to be so in my life, is that if something's painful, that means there's something not right in my thinking or my understanding or my feel. It's like information for me to, it's a clue. You need to go check this out, baby. You know, this is, if you're having pain about this, there's something about you that needs to be worked out.
Right. And then you look back,
and then
it's
like, you know, you're gating.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, you know, the tendency is to want to project it off onto the outside world, but really it's this amazing gift that we're given to look at, to help us examine ourselves, I think.
Right, and maybe that's what pain does.
Yeah.
Instead of avoiding pain every time,
right, it's a heads up. Yeah.
Maybe start looking into it.
Yeah.
Why do we?
It's like, okay.
Why do we feel that? Yeah. Exactly. Okay. However, Zane does say that to change to a more moral or spiritual type of living, a person must change or condition the conscious desires so that their tensions find greater satisfaction in releases which make for a higher life than in releases which permit the old type of living. The desires for living a finer existence must possess more energy than the desires for living more grossly. The higher desires must be given more energy, thought, feeling, than the lower desires. Give them, you know, if you don't want this desire that you have, give it less energy. You know, starve it of its energy.
You know what that's like? That's like that example I was telling you guys about this morning. I was having this, my cousin called me this morning, and she was telling me about having gone to this AA convention in San Antonio.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And it was, I mean, and it was, we were laughing about, it's just a bunch of, you know, thousands of drunks got together, and she said that their energy level was so high and so elevated that even the newspaper wrote about how their community was transformed for a few days with all these joyful, happy people who were greeting one another. And it was like transmuted Neptune. It was like people who used to go and get drunk.
Right.
And now they get high off of just being good to one another and living out of their higher self.
And that's usually the people are like that. And then they repress that energy because
Right.
they don't know how to go and channel it in a good direction until they're around other people that may understand them or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because getting drunk is a waste of your energy.
Yeah.
It totally depletes you and it suppresses you.
Right. Yeah.
Or makes you whatever.
Right.
Changes you in any weird way. But okay. Okay, so here I put
That's a cool dress too.
More new events.
okay, so therefore conscious desires can be changed by thinking and giving energy to desires in which you want desired attention to be released into activity of your conscious choosing instead of where your subconscious chooses. Zane says, to change the fortune so that better conditions will be attracted, a person must change or condition the desires of the stellar cells so that their tensions will find greater satisfaction in releases that attract fortunate events than in releases that attract unfortunate events. Willpower is directed desire. This guy has some willpower.
It's going somewhere. Maybe.
Alright. So, when the energies of strong desires are persistently directed to a given purpose from which they refuse to be deflected, we speak of it as an exercise in willpower. Wellington was just talking about this the other week. Willpower is nothing more nor less than persistently directed desire. The highest type of will is thus exhibited when there is a single aim in life toward which there is an intense and enduring passion that will permit no distractions, such as found in many ambitious and successful people. If the will is to accomplish much, however, there must be something more than just an inflexibility of purpose. There must be energy available and energy behind the desires, which can be directed to the accomplishment of the purpose. For the most pronounced results, the desires must have available energy and must not be scattered. Now, that we can see with many distractions in our life. I had many distractions, and I never did anything. I always said, I want to do this, I want to do that. And, well, I found out my day was, going to the movies, watching TV, going out and partying. I had many distractions. And when you have all that, your energy has to be scattered in many directions. So I never did all those things I used to want to do until you stop being scattered. And everybody does that in their own way, differently, how they're not scattered. So they must converge and coordinate to a single purpose. Such a convergence of desires toward a goal is present when the mind becomes dominated by some great and permanent passion.
Passionate mind.
There is a dominant desire to live and survive in life, and everything else is a subservient desire. That was when I showed you the ego, the desire for significance, and then the sub two or nutritive and reproductive desires. But the one great goal or passion for a person must enlist all of his or her lesser desires toward that goal or passion. The greatest problem confronting every human life is that of intensifying the desires and directing them into the most beneficial and effective channels. If the desires are weak, there is not sufficient energy to carry to completion any worthwhile project. Oops.
Oh, I can't wait to
No matter how strong the desires may be, if they are pulling in opposite directions or pulling in directions away from a worthy accomplishment, the life will fail to make the attainment it should. It is the function of wisdom to decide the direction in which the life should move. And when that direction is recognized, the next step should be to build upon the desires which are strong enough to absorb the energy of other desires, or at least which are strong enough that they can override any opposing desires. When such desires become strong enough, the actions will inevitably be in the direction dictated by wisdom. I put an asterisk on there because we can have desires that are dictated by something else besides wisdom. You know what I mean? If you consciously, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be a wise and glorious direction that you want to go, and you could still get there.
Well, but if that strong desire or that passion is overrides that,
But
that
wisdom
diversion.
helps you as you become more wise. You become better
and making
at
choices.
at making choices.
Yes, exactly. Making
Right.
choices of where you want to
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Yeah.
You know.
I think people today call wisdom making good choices.
Okay.
Don't you think? I mean,
Well,
I hear
that's
that a
one thing.
lot.
I
Yeah, that's
see.
one.
Well, yeah, that's one thing. I see wisdom as in a higher spiritual.
Well, I do too.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. I hear.
In the regular.
But
world.
on the mundane level, I hear
Yeah.
people talking a lot, especially if you're in the teaching profession or whatever. You know, your goal is to help children or your
Right.
friends or the people you love to make healthier choices for their lives.
Right.
You know, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Because that's where it comes down to. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
In what you're choosing to do every day.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Just what you said. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, because you know, because I always think of in the spiritual, but not everybody is there yet. You know what I mean? So we
Right.
have to so that they can get up there, we have to at least,
Right.
have them understand a certain level. So making right choices.
Yeah, well, for us to progress as the human race or whatever,
Right.
gotta go where we are.
Great. Let's start from where we are and go from there.
Like there.
Manifest your desires. There was all these posters. You can actually order this poster, and there was
That's
all
funny.
manner of posters. I only had 5 or 6 of them, but I thought this was really interesting. And you have to take a long time to look at it all, but.
Is there one that says you are here?
You're right here.
Okay.
This is you trying to manifest this desire.
You're the wizard in opposition to what is that?
Yeah, something. I don't know. Some creature. But there's laws, triangle. Interesting. Guidelines, principles, and then all little. So I guess you have to follow the yellow brick road and find a way that you want to get to your desire.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Or the blue road, or the brown road.
Right.
I just thought it was really interesting. Manifest your desires. So, willpower is directed desire. All the actions of life, including the manner in which thought elements combine, are conditioned by pleasure or pain. Those conditions the soul felt to be pleasurable. It had a tendency to move toward it so that it might gain their benefit. And the energy of this tendency to move towards something is an attractive desire. Those conditions the soul felt to be painful, it had a tendency to move away from, that it might escape destruction. And the energy of this tendency to move away from something is a repellent desire. To the extent they are conditioned by pleasure, they cause action in one direction. To the extent they are conditioned by pain, they cause action in the opposite direction. And what is he talking about in they? The
Pardon?
energy?
What'd you say?
What is he talking about when he says they? Because I think this came from this name. I guess it's desire. That's
The thought
desires.
cells. The thought cell.
Okay, the thought cells. Cause action
desire,
and opposite.
yeah.
Okay. So pleasure is attractive and pain is repellent. And like I said, I think the opposite can also be true. We can condition ourselves to believe the opposite is true.
Yes,
Whatever
we
she
call
said.
that perversion, though.
Yeah, but some people learn that way. Some people learn.
But working out,
in
the
fighting.
no pain, no gain.
Right.
But the thing is that in the pleasure of being healthy, or of losing weight, or of building up your body, is more pleasurable than the pain of
Right.
exercise.
Right.
And your motivation
Right.
to do that is more powerful than your motivation to avoid the pain
Right.
of working out. And if it's not, then you don't work out,
won't
and
work
you don't.
out.
Then
Right.
then you don't do it.
Right.
That's
You
a
have to
great
condition
example.
that you so strongly that you overcome the pain, that the pleasure of your objective overcomes the intermediate repulsion you have for the pain that it takes to get there, like going to school or going to college. study. That's a painful. Why do people do that?
Right.
Not because they like it, but they have to go.
There's a greater pleasure out there.
Right. It's what I actually like college, but I'm just one of those weird people.
That's good.
But you know what I'm thinking? Maybe this is he's talking about the thought cells in the astral world who are just going by this, whereas when what we do as a whole physical organism is we can choose to go towards pain or pleasure.
Yes.
But our thought cells who don't have
They
like
don't
this objective
filter.
consciousness going, oh, we should do this, or we should do that.
Right.
It's just taking in
Yes.
pleasure, it's going to go towards it, pain's going to go away from
Exactly.
it.
That's
Okay.
exactly it.
Now that makes sense.
But that's like, I remember years ago when I took a class in, this was in Southern California, and I remember, I think it was Doris Chase Doan, or maybe it was Ed Doan, I can't remember, but they talked a lot about Butch. Butch was their unconscious mind.
Oh.
And Butch wasn't filtering the way your conscious mind does. And so what Butch really wants to do is please you. So if Butch is going to really work hard to give you what he, she, or it thinks you want.
Right.
And it's just not filtering in any other way.
And pleasure is the easiest route.
Yeah.
Pain is like, ooh, you avoid that. That's cool. Okay, so we do the thing which at the moment is most pleasurable to us, or is at least less painful. Now, see, like, I think maybe he's going back and forth between a whole person and an organism. You know what I mean? And maybe that's why I get a little bit of confusion when I'm reading this stuff.
Oh.
We do the thing which at the moment
His
is most
pronouns
pleasurable
are
to us,
ambiguous?
or at least, yes! Pronouns are very
You think
ambiguous.
a grammar instructor might give him a hard time?
He might be fine with grammar and structure, it's just he forgets the pronouns, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Who's he talking to? Who's he talking about? So, again, we do the thing at the moment is most pleasurable to us, or at least less painful. And I'm going to say, not in all cases, but if you're talking about a single-celled organism or a thought cell, yes. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it may be, however, that our objective mind registers only pain. Oh, he's just talking about in this situation. And this is what I wrote. And sometimes people condition themselves to find pleasure in painful things and vice versa. Yet the very fact that we are urged on to a given act implies that within our unconscious mind there are elements that get more pleasure from this course of action than the amount of pain objectively recognized. Can anyone think of examples of this concept? Okay, Paul was talking about that. You were just talking about that with exercise.
Exactly.
The bigger picture is I'm going to feel healthy and that's pleasurable, so I have to work through the pain to get to it. So that's what you're saying.
Saving
Yeah,
money
it was
can
like-
be painful,
I work out.
but there's a bigger picture.
Yeah, really.
Right.
That's a good-
I work out on a regular basis. When I get up in the morning, I don't even give myself a chance to think about it. I just head to the gym.
Yeah.
And when I do allow myself to think about it, I'm going, oh, this is the last thing I'm doing. But you know what? When I walk out of that gym, I feel great.
Exactly. And then you become conditioned where you actually
That's
love
what I go.
exercise.
That's what I only allow myself to think about is how I'm going to feel when I get out, walk outside that gym.
Yeah. Bikram's yoga is just like that. You should try it.
Huh?
I got my friend onto Bikram's yoga. It's the hot yoga where you're sweating the whole time, but you do the same routine the whole time.
I like hatha.
Hot yoga.
Yeah, I like to go and work out vigorously, and then I do yoga at the end.
Well, you should try Bikram's and see what you say after you say it. Because my friend did the same thing. A lot of people don't understand that there's a big difference between Bikram and regular yoga. Mm-hmm. You sweat your butt off. Okay, where are we? So every organization of the thought cells contains the pleasure or pain attached to them when they were formed. Thus, within the unconscious mind are a vast number of experiences, simple and complex, which have that conditioning energy attached to them, which now persist as those tensions which we know as desires. The amount of conditioning energy a desire contains is proportional to the duration and intensity of the feeling accompanying the experience. In chapter 2, I know, isn't that cool? In chapter 2, we learn that simple sensations fuse to become perceptions, and perceptions fuse to build conceptions. And abstract ideas are the farthest removed from simple sensations. The general rule is that the farther away we get from simple sensations, the less intense the feelings will be experienced. Therefore, abstract ideas contain negligible feeling and little desire. Zane used the example of an abstract idea being the number 10. Gives neither pleasure nor pain nor tension associated with it to call it a desire. But I think some people have a strong feeling for numbers.
They're conditioned that.
Yeah,
That's true, right,
Yeah.
right.
But intrinsically, there's no pleasure or pain.
Right, it's just right. Okay, that makes sense. Also, Zane says that general ideas like loving all mankind are too vague and do not contain the proper sensory elements to give them motive power. Mankind as an idea can embrace some attractive desires and some repellent desires, depending on your experiences with people, that go into making up the general idea of mankind. Yet in the idea of loving mankind, love is essentially an attractive desire. So you may act benevolently toward mankind, which may cause pain, and you may act poorly toward that which may cause pleasure. Humans do crazy things. Where mankind is concerned, some of what makes up mankind may give rise to feelings the very opposite of love. The intellectual concept of loving all mankind, Zane says, lacks sufficient sensory elements to enable a person to build strong desires around us.
Well, I
And it is-
mean, what he's saying is that if you need something that really, you know, it may not work. You may need something that's more closer to you and more
understand it.
important to you
Right.
than love of mankind.
Right.
That's too
Abstract.
It's too abstract to generate to really generate the desire that you want. You need desire energy,
Right, right.
and then you condition that positively or negatively.
There was a slide that I had that he actually does talk about that. So sometimes I put these comments in when I'm writing it, and then I'll take them out later when I go and find something else that pertains to what he's saying. And there was something exactly that he said that, and I think it's later in there, and we'll get to it, but exactly what you said, Paul. So I kind of agree with you the more I think about it. I do this all the time. If I just let myself stew in it for a while, it starts to make sense.
No, but that's good that you're questioning. I think it's great that you question it. It's a good thing to do.
He outlines 7 states of emotional development and touches on that very concept, that to say that I'm going to love all of mankind is too great a leap initially.
Initially, okay, I agree with you there.
Because
Absolutely.
that's the 7th stage, is the Plutonian
Right.
universality.
You kind of have to work
And
yourself
there's
up.
quite a few things ahead of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's way.
That makes sense, because as a child, you know, if you start out, that's how you grow.
Mhm.
And you develop first, it's all about you, and then it becomes about other people and the family and friends and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that you can't just start out there and go, oh yeah, I'm going to love all mankind. Sure. So how often we see people, and this was in the book, how often we see people who, with intellectual honesty, condemn a vice or a passion, yet they themselves are unable to renounce the very vice they are condemning in others. The difference between recognizing right and practicing it has become proverbial. What we've seen today, I think, about this, the louder and stronger somebody yells about somebody else's vice and passion, the more that they're doing it.
We've seen that with
themselves.
some of our religious leaders.
And Washington, D.C.
Exactly. Washington, D.C., the ones that are against gay marriage and this or that, or, you know.
Yes, they're dabbling on that side of the fence now, aren't they?
And that is a psychological term, they call it deflection, right? They're shouting loud and strong, oh,
Yeah.
you can't have gay marriages,
Right.
you can't. And the stronger and louder they protest is the more like you're going to be looking, oh, what does that guy do?
Yeah, why does it care so much?
Yeah, right? So, but I think now in psychology we see that now. psychology had a lot of, in the 30s and 40s and 20s and stuff, they had a lot of repressed things in society. Society was in a general state in a good way, you know, for everybody to look at. So now we have a lot more fodder for psychology to look at and go, wow, there's this and there's that, and you know what I mean? So I think we've just, you know, we've gone a little bit farther.
As they said in the 60s, let it all hang in. And we did.
Okay, so as all the desires which already persist in the thought organizations of the astral body have been conditioned by pleasure or pain, it is obvious that the method to be employed in the conscious building of those desires is also to use pleasure and pain. Pain is repellent. A feeling of fear, for instance, may prevent the continuation of some action which had become habitual. But pain also adds discord to the stellar cells and stellar structures, which tends to attract future misfortune, so that its employment in the building of desires should be with the utmost discretion. Okay, so like if you break your leg when you're exercising, that's painful, and then you don't want to exercise anymore because is that kind of what he's talking about? That example?
Probably.
Pleasure, however, is attractive and in addition tends to the organization of the stellar cells of the astral body into a harmonious and fortune-attracting structures. In the building of desires, it is the chief agent to be recommended. Any possible course of conduct may be conditioned to yield pleasure and therefore to possess strong motor tendencies. Okay, so he is saying that we can condition things ourselves to make it pleasurable,
Yeah.
or to make feel pleasurable for that. Abstract ideas may be made to possess intense motor tendencies by associating them with desires that have strong sensory elements. We are all acquainted with people, no doubt, who have a veritable passion for mathematics. If we follow the steps by which such a passion developed, it will be revealed the general method of conditioning by which a liking for anything can be cultivated. He went on to talk about how a person that says they like mathematics actually condition themselves to like it, but I believe there are some people actually that like it in general. He apparently does not. So he uses this as an example. But, you know, I think there's people, because he went on to say that, okay, so a kid's in school and directed thinking is painful, but because he won awards for math, all of a sudden he's associating pleasure with it, and so he goes on and has honor and status based on his mathematical abilities, so then he turns mathematics, which are dry numbers, as Zane says, into something pleasurable. And I'm like, well, maybe he just liked math to begin with.
Well, he probably has, that person has facility. I mean,
Right.
It's a natural, whatever you have facility for comes with ease, and so it's
Right.
always associated, but there's pleasure associated with it.
Right.
But math,
He said that it
Intrinsic
was
or
conditioning.
external.
it's a good example in the sense that
conditioning.
math is one of the best examples of where people, if they early on, if they have some difficulty and they don't get some help and tutoring from the parents or whatever,
Yeah.
to get over the little obstacles as they go,
Yeah.
they develop a very negative
Right.
conditioning against mathematics and then think that they're terrible at it and that, you know, that's pretty much the end of the road for them.
Right.
You know, and then they get up, but if they end up, you know, getting to college, then, you know, they,
Get some tutoring, and then they see, wait a minute, it's really this easy? Really?
well, yeah, maybe if you're lucky. You know,
But some people
sometimes
really
they
have no
never
facility
overcome that.
for it.
Right.
And only because they had because everybody who's studied math is a great example of where you can have little obstacles that just with a little bit of help, boom, you get over, boom, you go up. And you may encounter another one, but if you get a little help, or you're inclined to work at it enough, you get over it, then, you know, you can move on. But
Right.
a lot of people, they don't get any help. They get stuck and
Right.
there's nobody to help them. And
So
Well, and the
they
nature
hate
of
that.
the nature of
They hate
math
it.
in school is that they don't, you know, they just keep building one concept on top of the other, and if you're stuck down here, you're lost up here.
It's
Right.
true. I had a friend that was that way, but he was a very intelligent person, and I knew that. And I was like, but he had a real negative connotation with math. But he was in the weather field because he was in the military. And I was just like, I know you have the intelligence to do math in the
Right.
basic world. And so he wanted to go back to college. He had that desire and will, and of course they're forced to take the remedial math at the beginning. Well, he was taught the very basics of the properties of mathematics, and all of a sudden he's like the whiz of the class, and everybody's asking him, once he learned those things and he got away from that negative connotation because he had a bad childhood or whatever, then all of a sudden, and I knew he was going to be brilliant, he could have figured that out, but he had to, just like you were saying, he had to go push through the pain of the negative conditioning, and then realize that he could learn math. And a lot of people say, I can't do this. Yes, you can. Anybody can learn anything.
I always figured
You gotta put your mind to
it.
it. Exactly. Okay, so we did all this, right? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the mysterious D's?
Aha! That's what
I was wondering about that.
They're
I was
probably.
afraid to ask. Because
Well,
you said it at the beginning, and I wasn't listening.
No, I didn't.
She
say
finished
anything.
up one of those paragraphs, and I'm thinking,
That's the
is that what the D stands for?
You guys haven't figured that one out yet. I was wondering if it was going to be into anybody's subconscious right now. I was going to ask everybody at the end.
I think I know.
You know what it is? What is it? What is it?
I think it was you cut and paste a lot.
No, I knew you were gonna-
D is Scorpio,
gonna
isn't
do
it?
that.
Isn't D Scorpio?
No, I thought it was because that was the structure
Let's
of
think that through.
PowerPoint.
Highest religious
Actually,
expressions.
it's a reminder to look at my notes.
Oh!
And I was gonna have something like looking down or direct, or I forgot
Down.
the word I had, and then I was like, I don't have to write. I was like, oh well, who cares? It's my PowerPoint presentation. I don't care because I often forget to look at my notes. So that was a reminder.
Oh, good.
And I just left it, and then I said, I'm going to ask people if they wondered if they'd seen that. It's in their subconscious somewhere.
I use it as a marker for the
That's correct. I love it.
So, this actually, I put this from the previous. It was in this part of the chapter, but we were talking about feelings earlier, so that's why I put this in there. Is foliage which tries to escape the law of nature, which modern scientific psychology. Man is led by his feelings alone. So he talks about that.
What did you wait? That you went through that so fast.
Okay,
I
I'm
didn't follow
sorry.
you.
It was, I already wrote it earlier, but I'll go ahead and read it again. Zane writes, it is folly to try to escape that law of nature which modern scientific psychology praises. Man is led by his feelings alone. Why shouldn't he be led by his feelings? That is why feelings were evolved by his soul. When people try to act against their feelings, they are attempting the impossible. Remember we
So
talked
this
about
is that thing from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
What should they do instead so that their actions may be controlled by wisdom instead of by blind impulse is to properly train their feelings. When their feelings are properly conditioned, their actions will take the proper course as a result of the operation of this natural law. So we've been talking about that. I like this.
So what is Stanley doing here?
Stanley was deeply disappointed when high in the Tibetan mountains he finally found his true self.
Oh my gosh! Yes, Stanley, we sympathize.
I'm actually a corporate lawyer.
Yeah, it's funny.
Look at corporate America.
He's got a Dow symbol.
I know it's fascinating.
He's like the
But look at the
hippie
expression of his true self. I mean, both of their expressions are, oh my
They're
God.
both disgusted with each other.
He's saying, are you here to get me out of this place? And Stanley's saying, huh?
That can't be me.
Oh God, that's funny.
Okay, properly directing desire. Look at this picture. Isn't this awesome? I love the pictures I find, and I just find them randomly. I'm looking for something else, and I'm like, oh, cool picture. That's actually, it says it's in Egypt.
Yeah, it looks like
Cairo.
Cairo. See all the smog?
Oh, I've never been, so I've only seen the nice pictures of the pyramids, like. Okay, properly directing desire. When wisdom has decided upon a course of conduct, it is utmost folly to try to drive yourself to follow this course. You cannot make yourself love all mankind. You cannot make yourself love anyone. You cannot make yourself a moral person. If you are a moral person, it is because you take pleasure in doing right or fear doing wrong. Instead of driving yourself to the decided course of action, the proper method is to set systematically to work to associate as many pleasurable feelings with this course of action as possible. Okay, So I had an example of basically doing something in this manner where I kept saying for a while when I first moved to Albuquerque, I wanted to become a more spiritual person. That's a very vague idea. It's like loving all mankind. How the heck do you do that, right? And I kept saying it, and I kept doing these things in my life that I was doing this and that, and I was like, this isn't spiritual. So how did I do that, right? And for me, I have to set up a habit, a pattern. And I have to do it one step at a time. My first one was, I watched a lot of TV, so I stopped buying cable, right? There you go. So what I was doing was, I started changing my environment, that there was nothing left to do other than spiritual things. So first I, unplugged the TV. Then what did I do? I made a little meditation center in my bedroom section. So I'd see that every day, my meditation thing, and it was always set up. So of course that reminded me I wanted to do it every day. And then, I would...
Did you like meditating?
I did for a time. It was really cool. I really got great experiences from it. And then I kind of fell out of it, and it's changed, and it's not been the same like it was before. So that's kind of sad. But I keep doing it anyway, because I want to have it, and it does help to direct my thinking better. Because, and it's a continuous process. It's a practice. I have a friend that says, I can't do that. I said, no. As a baby can't lift, 20 pounds. It doesn't mean he can't at some point in his life do that. Never say you can't do it. Anybody with a will, a directed desire, and a willpower to do something can set their mind to do something and practice it over and over and over. And it can take your entire life to practice it. And that's why they call it practicing yoga and practicing meditation, because you're continually practicing it and you're continually doing it. So,
do you think it's important to have little pleasures along the way to keep you at it?
Pleasurable conditioning.
My ultimate goal is I wanted to be more spiritual.
Okay.
You found us, right?
I did. But I had to change my environment to set that. And that's the way I did it. Everybody has to do their own thing, their own way. And Zane is saying that you have to take little pleasures in finding more little sensations and finding pleasure and then building on that. I found my best way is I had to change my environment. I moved, I made space for my meditation, I stopped with the TV. I put out spiritual books on my coffee table so that whenever I come home I see, books I want to read instead of packed away. And I changed my environment little by little so that everything, now these things are habit. They're just habit. But, that's another way that you can change what you want your overall arching goal to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's cool.
So, there has already been built strong desires within yourself from past experiences and astrological tendencies. These strong desires can be linked with a course of action that you have decided upon. Every family of thought elements can express either constructively or destructively, and it is not difficult to cultivate pleasure out of its constructive use as out of its destructive application. It is easy to divert a given desire into a channel which will enable its energies to express their essential quality in a constructive manner. An appeal can be made to constructive expression of these desires, which already have been strongly built into the astral body in association with a decided upon course of action, so that their energy goes into the course of action and lends pleasure to that course of action. So he's basically saying, like, you get little pleasures along the way when you're changing your course of action. Because it's hard to form habits. That's usually, painful to begin with. If you have become accustomed to derive pleasure from the exercise of intelligence, this intelligence can be employed in the course of action. If you find pleasure in fighting, recognize this course of action as an opponent to be overcome. It may be that the urge for power is strong within you, or the urge for domestic facilities, or the individualistic urges, or the urge for safety, the urge for utopian conditions. I think he's trying to say you take whatever you naturally feel an urge for and you build upon that, right? But whatever it is, it gives you great pleasure, is a source of your energy. And so you start from there and you build on it.
Right, and I think it also implies that if you can tap into those primary urges, or they're not, those aren't primary, they're secondary, but
Right.
they're very potent.
Right.
You can figure out some thought, feeling, or behavior that ties you into one of those, and if it's pleasurable in your own personal being,
Right.
it'll work. It'll have greater power for you. It's
Yes.
like a key.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you asked me about the meditation, yeah, I do remember there was there was like this feeling, sensation I had.
That kept you coming back.
Yeah, and then of course it all changed, and so I'm trying to get it back, of course. But it's
You have to
hard.
go look at your progressions that you had back then.
Hard. Yeah.
Might have been Neptune.
Maybe. So the source of this source of energy represents an organization in your astral form possessing powerful desire. We were talking about that. And through keeping before the mind the method by which the course of action can be made to contribute in some way to the realization of this powerful desire, its energies can be diverted into the channel of the decided course of conduct. To permit the river to run its own wayward course is to waste its energy. To permit passion to expend itself in spontaneous gratification is to waste the vital essence of life. But to make it constructively available, we must know how to use it. Merely to say, I will to do good, I will to love mankind, I will to serve my fellow man, I will commit no sin, is about as effective as to say to the river, I will that you shall run the industrial plants in yonder city. I love the way it talks. In yonder city. Before there is an altruistic effort of value, there must be sensations, simple desires, a dominant passion, and finally, as the energy of the river is transformed into electrical power, association must be employed to direct the whole current toward a more complex end. I think that's what you were talking about, Wellington, where you said there's 7 things they build upon.
States of emotional development.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, and it's probably true. If I thought about this more, it seems like this is probably, a way that most of us do work towards a bigger goal, a more complex thing. There must be knowledge how the current can be transformed and directed, and this knowledge must be applied. And if life is to yield high accomplishment, there must be knowledge how, by artifice, I don't know what that means, the primitive impulses may be diverted into a more useful work than sensual gratification. What is by artifice?
By design.
Oh,
Yeah.
by design?
I think you could substitute. You have to, exercise
Okay.
your intelligence.
The method by which you accomplish it. So.
Okay. Now this is kind of interesting. There was a lot of things I did learn, but I never applied them. So I had a lot of knowledge, but I never worked at myself to apply these principles and stuff. So that's a very important thing. If you want to do something, on this whatever. There's Egypt
I've
too.
been there.
Did they have?
Yeah.
Was it flooded like that?
No, it wasn't flooded like that, but
Yeah.
it was close to
Wow.
water.
it's
Because
amazing.
they changed it.
It's
Yeah,
interesting to see what it looks like when it's
Yeah.
flooded.
Furthermore, this knowledge must be put into practice. Again, all knowledge is great, but once you don't use it or give it to somebody else to use, then it's useless, really. Zane says, if I wish to love mankind, I must learn to love someone or more persons, wife, husband, father, mother, child, friend, or acquaintance, fervently, so that when the generic thought of mankind rises into my consciousness, it will have attached to it the lovable qualities of this familiar individual. I must scan every person I meet to find some admirable quality which I can love, and I must never permit the thought or image of any person's repulsive qualities to remain an instant in my consciousness.
Wow, that's hard.
Sure it is.
It is hard to do. But once you start doing it, it becomes a habit to just forget all the little flaws and look at the overall.
Right.
And find something.
Right.
Just giving somebody a smile. You read their aura. They're the type of person you'd normally run from. Just giving them a smile can change the energy dramatically.
It's true, absolutely. So I got about 5 more slides. So we're right on time. Yay! So why are there man haters and woman haters? It is because in every such instance, the hater has met with disappointment in some member of the opposite sex. The whole generic concept of man or woman, as the case may be, consists of a composite image of experiences with individuals. Each experience adds to the quality of the generic concept according to its intensity. When grief or sufficient intensity caused by one member of the sex is added to the generic concept, the whole concept becomes dominated by pain. Every person of the sex which caused the grief is associated in the mind so closely with this painful image that because the one man or woman who caused the pain is hated, this hatred is transferred to all. And that can be true. Or it can be in any subject, or it can be in any group.
Men or women.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be like racial people, racists or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
I had some experiences with a certain group of people, and I tried hard because every time, but that's a conditioning thing. That's what normally happens with us. If we have 2 or 3 experiences with the same type of group of people, the next time we come across them, it's hard to go, oh, I'm just going to look at them as an individual, because we've been conditioned. We're like, we keep repeating this cycle. So I can see how those prejudices and judgments can come up. You know what I mean? So, but it's very hard, and you try to work your best, and then they disappoint you again. You're just like, damn it!
Maybe you just met the wrong people.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Right.
But it was in a racial group, so, and they worked in a certain what do you call it, a business.
Well,
We kept meeting that same type of.
that same time,
Group,
yeah.
in
Well,
a
but if you
business.
were in a different environment, you
business.
might meet totally different kinds of people.
Right. Well,
And that's
obviously
what
I
you-
know that.
Right.
But it's hard though
But
when
it's
I go to that
hard.
same type of business and I meet that same type of group of person. I'm going, oh.
Well, maybe it's not a prejudice at that point. Maybe it's just like, maybe there is a behavior
Right,
that
but
goes
it's hard
with
to,
this.
it's hard to get away from that conditioning. Okay. It will now be apparent that morality as well as other desired characteristics can be attained only through the cultivation of appropriate emotions. To annex some quality to the character, associate it with as many pleasurable sensations as possible, but do not dwell on the painful quality of that which is to be eliminated. To think of a characteristic feeds thought energy into it. This is the real secret of the biblical admonition: resist not evil, but overcome evil with good. That's great, huh?
But
Just
not
talk
dwelling
about
on the
it.
painful qualities is really important. I've known so many people who tried to quit smoking, and they did real well for a week or a month or a year. And one instance of falling off, 1/2 a cigarette, if they smoke it, then they consider themselves a failure and then they give up. If they had dwelled on their success, be it a week, a month, a year, whatever the successes were, then they could go
Kept
right back and emulate their previous track record rather than dwell on the negative.
Dwell on the craving. Oh, I want it. I want that cigarette.
Well, they dwelled on their failure.
Or
What
the
they labeled themselves a failure
There you go. Right.
rather than the success. They successfully quit for a whole week.
Right.
You know, that's an accomplishment to be dwelled on. It's a happy thing.
Right.
But one little failure, like having a puff, behind the wife's back or whatever, and they give up completely. But they wouldn't be doing that if they dwelled on the successes.
Exactly. He even talks about that. Feel intensely about a matter, like telling the truth. Should the desire for falsehood gain the victory, put it aside as of one moment and never permit the painful emotions, shame, remorse, dishonesty to rise into consciousness. Exactly what you're talking about. Consider this but a single blow struck by the adversary in life's battle for character. A brave man cares nothing about one slight wound.
Yes. That's a good way of
Good
putting it.
picture.
Yes. One
No, it's absolutely true. When you're working towards changing something, absolutely, this is absolutely important. Not to dwell on that little failure or that little thing, and to keep moving forward and just keep thinking about the positive.
Reward yourself for the success that you did attain,
Exactly.
and associate that with lots of pleasure and happiness and patting yourself on the back.
Exactly. Divert all mental forces into feeling love for truth. It is, or whatever you're trying to do, it is the object to be gained at all costs, and one should not expect to win an important battle without some small loss. By developing pleasurable sensations and emotions, any traits of character can be formed, and because of the energy they release, automatically dispossesses their opposite energy. And there's another one. There's a habit transformation. This is the angel and the devil. He's got what? Associations, strategies, anchors. Oh yeah, these things.
That's good. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going.
Yeah, that's good.
Good one.
I'm gonna buy one of these and put it on my wall and be like staring. The end.
Oh, bravo!
And we got like 5 minutes to discuss anything if you wanted to.
Do you want us to discuss
Flooding of
anything,
the
Miss
Nile.
Yvette?
What?
Let's discuss the flooding of the Nile.
The flooding of the Nile.
The flooding of the Nile.
Yeah.
That's not the temple they moved so that they could dam.
Yeah, it is the temple.
That is the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is
I
that
remember
opposite?
reading about that in Life magazine when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
There was a thing about desire I could read. I forgot it wasn't.
Well,
You wanted me to read
you got
it?
3 minutes.
Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
It's only about 3 paragraphs.
We'll see if we agree with it.
Okay, this is from an article on the internet. Desire is a fundamental force of human existence and the primary manifestation of sexual energy, and is present in all human beings, without which survival would be meaningless. Although desire can have negative connotations with societal pressures on controlling desire, desire is largely positive and constructive, although aggressive impulses lead to destructive desires as well. Desire is the root of all human activity, from creative pursuits to business pursuits, and we are all motivated by one form of desire or another, and these may be a desire for fame, desire for benevolence, desire for money, desire for admiration, popularity, or even desire for power. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list of desires, and the range of desires could vary according to the range of human emotions and experiences. In psychoanalysis, Freud has differentiated between the sexual urges and the aggressive or death urges. Sexual urges, when sublimated or channeled, would result in creative and constructive pursuits, and aggressive urges usually lead to feelings of depression or destructive behavior. Desires could thus be constructive and creative, or destructive, and although both of these types of desires would have similar roots in the unconscious, the manifestation would be exactly the opposite. I would consider 3 different meanings of desire, and all desires could be categorized under these 3 major kinds of desires. I would call this the 3 P's theory of desire: progeny, power, and purpose, which is exactly what Zane says, right?
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the
Driver
power.
significance.
Desire significance is the power one. Nutrition is, well, he's got progeny and purpose and power. So
Nutrition would be power.
maybe that, yeah, energy, power.
Mhm.
Okay.
Progeny
Purpose
would
would
be
be the
race
higher.
preservation.
Desire for significance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this guy kind of is exactly what Zane says.
Yeah.
And this is an article written, just recently.
Yeah.
So I thought that was another thing to add to Zane's little.
Very good, Yvette.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
The end.
That was good.
Okay. Thanks everybody for watching when you do watch.
Sorry about the power failure.